Hello, folks. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. I know, hopefully, my voice is coming through loud and clear. I know sometimes it has the temerity to not do that and to sometimes be lower than it should be on the old OBS settings, but hopefully that's not the case. If you like what I do, then please head on over to Patreon or subscribe to the channel. I'm hoping to get to 15,000 subscribers at some point this year. That'll be awesome for the channel if we can get to that so far. So if you are discovering me for the first time, head on over there if you can do, if you enjoy what I'm doing. And if you don't, then fair enough, sometimes I blather on a little bit, just like I'm doing now, so I'll shut up. And also, if you like what I'm doing, and you're into Warhammer, which you should be because you're watching the channel, or you might be thinking about getting into it, head on over to Composite Games, where they can sort you out with a 5% discount at checkout if you use the promo code Northern Exile down below. So, today's going to be a long one. That's what she said. But no, today is going to be quite a, shall we say, tumultuous video. I spent all weekend working on this script, and I've rewritten it quite a few times because over the past year, like last year, when the channel was first taking off, I decided to give my opinions that nobody really asked for on all things Games Workshop and Warhammer and things like that. Mainly because I figured that, hey, I'll be a bunch of you subscribing, maybe that's something that you would like. These weren't videos that were well thought out, these were videos that were off the cuff, off the top of my head, where I was discussing different themes about what Games Workshop were getting right and what they were getting wrong. I've decided this year, since we are now at exactly a year since I started doing that, to revisit a lot of those videos, or at least the themes behind those videos, and give you more of an in-depth take, written script on what I think Games Workshop are getting right and what they are getting wrong. And the unifying video of all of those things is going to be this one. So, on this channel, we like to go over things that are happening in the hobby at any one time. It's important to know, though, that Games Workshop are not the hobby. Alright? They are a part of it. Saying Games Workshop is the hobby is kind of like saying Disney are animated feature films. But they're not, are they? Right? This video, however, is about Games Workshop, and namely, if they are really the boogeyman that people in the hobby at large seem to think they are. They do get a real kicking on this channel, and others, for the things that they get routinely wrong. The shenanigans they pull, but is there any harm in finding a balance in these things, if there is one to be found? Those of you who know me know that I like to find that balance in all things that I do on this channel. Because as a historian, a lot of the time, the truth of a thing often lies between two complete extremes. I like to use the Agincourt example, The Agincourt example is the French say that they didn't really outnumber the English at Agincourt, even though they lost, right? They say we outnumbered them like 1.5 to 1, That's about it. Whereas the English say, no, they outnumbered us 50 to 1 and we still beat them. Well, the truth is somewhere in between, isn't it? We now think it was something like, something like 8 or 9 to 1 at the Battle of Agincourt. That's the latest historical estimates anyway. So, the truth is in between the two extremes. That is the same with everything, and Games Workshop are one of those things. Let's start with the good and move into the bad of why Games Workshop are the biggest form of the hobby currently available, and examine what that means for our hobby going forwards. Each of these talking points that I'm going to go through will be expanded upon in a later video. I may combine a few if they're very similar, but treat this video as more of a primer for the upcoming series of 40k rants that is coming up, so you can head back here to see my thoughts on things in one big video if you want to, before I cover them in detail in the future, so you've got those things to look forward to over the summer. I did similar videos in smaller pieces last year, as I said. Now that I have a year of research and learning under my belt, I want to do an actual series. So, let's get to that unifying video, that Lexicanum video, and then later on we'll be getting into more in depth on all of these little things. But anyway. So the love of the lore that Games Workshop throw out there, they do produce a lot of content, and if you love lore, this is a company that you really want to get behind and perhaps start giving your money to. When it comes to their lore, and whilst sometimes this can be a bad thing, with them putting out so much in terms of lore, the setting can get a bit convoluted, They just produce more and more and more. I have an exhaustive personality, which means too much of the same thing makes me check out. This can lead me to completely backing off from 40k at times, as it can be a bit much. I'm very much the same with writing as well. I can't write in one genre for years at a time. I'll go in like 4 to 6 month spurts of writing fantasy, and then I'll go on a 4 to 6 month spurt of writing sci-fi, and then I'll go in between, just chilling out, doing it on my own time, just to get better at it. Same thing goes for history. For 4 to 6 months I'll be reading about classical Roman history, then 4 to 6 months I'll be reading about the Plantagenets, and then 4 to 6 months I'll be reading about the Napoleonic Wars, and on we go, That's just the kind of personality that I have. And if you have a similar personality to me, Warhammer might be a bit overwhelming for you, because they never stop, there's always more, and they will always keep throwing it at you, even if you beg them to stop. Games Workshop, though, say to those who do not have this problem. I have known a lot of people over the years who simply cannot get enough of what Games Workshop brings in terms of content. If you're one of these people, then you will simply never come to an end of the stuff on offer from Games Workshop. You can read a load of all of the Marvel comics, right? You can read all of the Marvel comics for a certain superhero that you like. You will never find an end to Horus Heresy literature. Alright? There are 60 plus books, and anthologies, and audiobooks, and audio exclusive books, and comics, and all. There's too much out there to consume. And even after you've done all that, you then have fantastic lore people on YouTube. I do not count myself in that group, by the way. But there is a fantastic group of people on YouTube that you can then go and explore to get even more out of it. There's literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours of content out there for you to consume, and even when you think that you've reached the underlevel of that iceberg, there's still more to go. It is a mammoth setting, and if you like that kind of thing, this is the company and product for you. So, the uniqueness of their worlds is something that I really wanted to touch upon, because I don't see a lot of people going on about it in terms of a positive of Games Workshop. As much as they steal ideas from other creators and worlds, there is nothing quite like Warhammer 40,000. I firmly believe one of the main reasons losing the old world of Warhammer was so tragic was that the old world in itself was rather grimdark, Germanic, and unique. Not something often seen in the fantasy sphere. What replaced it was a bog-standard, soft magic fantasy mess that is Age of Sigmar's Saturday morning cartoon goofiness. That was okay as a thing, but as a Games Workshop thing, it doesn't work. Why? Because it doesn't have its own unique stamp. Age of Sigmar looks like any other fantasy setting that you may have come across. When you look at Age of Sigmar lore, you could be looking at Divinity Original Sin 2. You could be, There's nothing stopping you from thinking, oh yeah, that's Divinity, right? Somebody who doesn't know all of the iconography of Khorne wouldn't point at that and say it's Warhammer. That's an issue. At least it's an issue for me. It's the very reason why it doesn't work so much for me as a setting, whereas Warhammer 40,000 definitely does. There is a very good reason why it is the poster child of the entire hobby, not just Games Workshop. And I'm sorry, if you don't believe that Warhammer 40,000 is the poster child of your wargaming hobby, I've got a reality check for you. It most certainly is. Even if you don't like Games Workshop, I'm sorry, this is the reality we are living in. Still, there is nothing in the world quite like 40k. I can show you just how unique and powerful a setting it is. Answer me this question. Stop what you're doing, unless you're driving home, then, carry on driving, or at least pull over. But answer me this. When was the last time you saw something aping off of 40k in the same way fantasy writers use Tolkien as inspiration? As in, when was the last time you saw a setting that looked like 40k and kind of felt like it, but was not 40k? I've never seen one. I've seen settings that have slightly similar forms of styles that 40k uses, but not a setting that is in the 40k mould in terms of sheer size, darkness, and Britishness in terms of sci-fi. You can look at a setting like The Witcher, and you can sort of see how they've taken tropes from fairy tales and a lot of Tolkien's works as well, and twisted them with a more darker aesthetic, right? But you can still see where the genesis of that work is. It's Tolkien. It harkens back to those old original fantasy tales, and even before that with Slavic and Polish fairy tales. It's all of that mixed in together, but you can still see the fingerprints of Tolkien on the soul of The Witcher. Games Workshop, there's a very good reason why there's nothing quite like 40k, alright? And I'll get into that a little bit later on. 40k does have a lot of things in where you can see the fingerprints of other settings there, but it's stolen directly from those settings. But I'll get into that a little bit later on. But there is no setting out there that has the same 40k spine as every single fantasy world does with Tolkien. That's how unique 40k is. It's so unique that nobody can ape off of it without people legitimately going, that's just 40k. This is due to the strength of the setting. Anything barely resembling 40k will be seen as, oh, that's for 40k, just with some other things thrown in. Which is garbage in itself, as 40k rips off most of the sci-fi genre to build its own setting. It is a product of the genius marketing of Games Workshop that so many brain-lit neckbeards are desperate to tear down anything even resembling 40k as a 40k rip-off. I have legitimately had people say to me that Dune is a 40k rip-off. I shit you not. These are the same smooth brains who will tell you that, you know, Blood Angels are a rip-off of Blood Ravens. I mean, God help us, right? These are the times we are living in, folks. These are the strange, strange times that we are living in. The strength of their games. Here's one that isn't in dispute, at least for me. 40k is, and always likely will be, the biggest game on the tabletop market. That is simply how it is, I'm afraid. Are there better games out there? Possibly. Just you try explaining to the rest of the world how good one-page rules are, though, or how brilliant Kings of War is compared to any Games Workshop product. You will be laughed out of the forum quicker than you can bleat the words, salty 40k fanboys. You know the type, the ones on the Facebook pages and forums of other sci-fi settings, telling people how 40k would completely deck anything in said setting. Jesus. I am a part of a lot of Mass Effect groups, and the sheer amount of 40k smooth brains who are on there telling us how 40k would run roughshod over anything in the Mass Effect universe, well, good for you. Bully for you. I hope that your parents didn't beat you too harshly as a child. Oh my god, let people enjoy what they want to enjoy. This is beyond the joke, okay? Please, do not run us down into a bad reputation, because we already have that reputation as salty-ass neckbeards because we play with toy soldiers, okay? Nevertheless, I'm going to take a little sip of my drink because we're at the halfway point. Nevertheless, 40k is the game that most of us grew up playing. It was the game on which we were weaned. It is the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition of the tabletop wargame sphere, for those of you who wish to look at it that way. And yes, I know 40k outdates 5th edition D&D before you start rending your garments and crying. I'm simply making a point towards their dual market domination. They are very, very, very similar in the way that they treat and are seen by the rest of the hobby in which they partake. A lot of people look at 40k in not a nice light. You know, you will find a lot of older hobbyists who play things like Manowar or play things like Hail Caesar or anything like that. They will look at 40k and they kind of look down their noses at it, to be honest with you. They kind of think it's lowbrow, they kind of think it's a bit mainstream, they kind of think it's lost its soul and its edge. Same thing goes for older role players and 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. They're very similar in the way that they work in the market, which is ironic, considering how much, when I worked at Games Workshop, they loved to shit on Wizards of the Coast. It was every single meeting they would take the piss out of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. I have no idea what that was all about. It was some sort of insecure rambling, I think, about how Wizards of the Coast actually tried to do retail stores in the US, and they failed miserably, and Games Workshop could not get enough of taking the royal piss out of them for that, which is funny in itself that a company is so petty behind closed doors, because it makes them more human, but it's also kind of tragic, in a way. Anyway. It is domination, though. It is domination. It is market domination. If you want to support a game that is going nowhere anytime soon, then 40k is your bet. And a good one at that. Its rules will always change. There will always be a new meta to chase. Always a new playstyle that is seen as rather strong to pursue. Whilst the lore has only just started to move along at a pace, the rules have never dragged their heels. They have always been changed and moved on for the apparent good of the game and its balance. If you want a vibrant game, full of folks to play, 40k is your game. That is simply how it is. It is much easier to get a game of 40k than it is any other tabletop product on the face of the earth if you're playing with toy soldiers. That is simply the way the world works. And I wish it was different, but this is how it is. If this is the game you want, that's the game that's the game you're getting. And for this, Games Workshop, we actually owe them a debt of gratitude here in building the hobby, because they have created a monolith of a game that sucks in people from all different walks of life to come and play this wonderful hobby with us. So, in that way, they are a force for good in the hobby. Oh my god, that felt dirty to say. It's a good game too. Whilst I personally think 8th edition kind of hit the sweet spot for me in terms of rules and simplicity, 40k as a whole is a good game to play when your opponent is willing to play ball. When you've got an opponent who just wants to have fun with you, 40k is probably one of the greatest things you can ever do with your time. I'm being honest. You know, that is coming from the heart. It is something that is completely beyond almost any other thing in the world in terms of being that game that everybody loves to play. When you've got a group or a friend who is into telling these stories with you on the tabletop and having a really good time and commiserates with your losses and your bad rolls and slaps you on the back when you do something good in a game, dude, those are some of the greatest and most formative experiences you're ever going to have, no matter what your age is. You could be in your 50s and 60s. I have a friend who's in his 50s, right? And only a couple of weeks ago, he played a game of 40k with me, with some of his really old models. It was a 1,000 point game, and we had an absolute blast. It was the first game I played in months. It was brilliant. We told a really cool story on Capture the Relic, and it was awesome. And we both went out and had a pint, had a pint or several afterwards. We both loved it. Mate, you cannot get better than that. It is an absolute barnstormer of a hobby when you get it right. Although stratagems, like most gimmicks Games Workshop throws into editions later into their runs, needs to go. And this is something that we'll go into later on in the negatives. Games Workshop do have a habit of getting in their own way at times when it comes to succeeding in the hobby, but we'll get into that. The look of their models. The final and possibly biggest bow in the Games Workshop arsenal of positives is this. Their models, at least their newer sculpts, generally rock the house, let's be honest. The new Primaris Marines are probably the best on the market, and that is even with the absolute flood of top quality models available on 3D printing these days. If Games Workshop can stick to this level of quality for future releases of other factions, I would say they stand a decent chance of riding the coming wave of 3D printing so long as they look at their prices again, because as we'll go into later on, they're kind of insulting right now. Most Imperium factions, or even human-based factions, like Chaos, Votan, and human-looking factions like the Eldar and others, have fantastic sculpts, either of certain models and units, or, if they are lucky, their entire line of models look like a work of bloody art. I'm looking at you, Sisters of Battle players, you lucky buggers. Whilst 3D printing is coming close, for the money, it is an absolute steal. Games Workshop still takes the biscuit for the best models on the market for a sci-fi war game, no matter how many Ravaged Star simps will want to tell you otherwise. Will this change in the future? Well, time will tell, guys. The fact remains that the feeling of unpacking a Games Workshop product fresh out of the box and simply popping models from a 3D printed sprue are totally different. One carries with it a sense of magic that harkens back to when you were a kid. It's an irreplaceable feeling, and even smelling the newness of that box is awesome. The other is just a bland acknowledgement that you've printed off another 300 Grey Knights that look like the Grey Knights, kind of, if you don't look too closely. Go you, I guess. You know? I'm not having a go at 3D printing there. It's coming on leaps and bounds, but the feeling of unboxing one is completely different from unboxing another. Some people don't care about that, but I tell you what, there are a lot of you who do. And if you are a 3D printer who still buys Games Workshop products off the shelf from time to time, you know what that feeling is, even if you love your 3D printer. Don't lie. Don't lie. So, that's enough of me kissing Games Workshop's arse. There were some negatives in there, but there will be some positives in the negative section as well. So, negatives. Here we go. This is where we could be seeing a little bit of, shall we say, how do I put this? Grimness? Kind of. The hypocrisy in dealing with content creators. This is kind of what launched my channel into the ether, besides Hobby Nightmares. Games Workshop's flagrant disregard with the rights to use their trademarks for non-profit things borders on the Nintendo level of retarded. We have seen the burgeoning and quite frankly fantastic and free community of artists, video makers and originals completely nuked by the emergence of Warhammer Plus and the need for Games Workshop to try to keep everything in-house, quote-unquote, behind a paywall or nothing. It is essentially almost as if the Games Workshop board literally took a whiteboard, wrote down what would nuke their own fan base into walking away, chose one of the worst options, and just went, yeah, that's what we'll do in 2022. The fact that we are still mostly here speaks to the worrying amount of pull and hold Games Workshop have over the industry as a whole. Let's be honest, they can do very little really bad that will get us to walk away for good. Even those of you who say that you're gone for good, you'll be back. You'll be back. Don't tell me you won't be back. Of course you will. We love this hobby, man. You're not going anywhere. Don't kid yourself. Games Workshop is basically everybody's that girl. You know, you may break up with her, but you're always coming back. Games Workshop are the last people who should be complaining about infringement of copyright. Ideas for 40k are just lifted, stolen, wholesale from things like Dune, Starship Troopers, Alien, and even the manga Berserk, which is my favourite manga, by the way, so fuck you for stealing Griffith, you sons of a bitches. I'm looking at you, not Griffith Fulgrim, right? F you for stealing him. With nary a thought to the consequences. Here is the thing. Writers of other works have said Games Workshop taking their stuff is a fair cop, quote-unquote, as everyone needs inspiration from somewhere. It's the writer's trick, right? I steal things, you know, I ape off of things all of the time when I write, even if I don't realise I'm doing it. So I can't have a go at somebody else for doing it to me, right? Games Workshop does not take this stance. They climb up the ladder of other people's success on the back of more talented peers, and then pull the ladder up after them so that nobody else can follow. That, as a guy who likes to write, I can never forgive or condone. The amount of times I've sat down to write something sci-fi and grim dark, only to stop because I know I could never make a fucking penny from it, because these arseholes would come after me, hook, line and sinker, and bury me in litigation, is infuriating. And I'm not the only writer who feels this way at all. Their absolute contempt for their audience. Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you guys, right? During my time at Games Workshop, I'm going to lay it out for you. They hate you. They hate your fucking guts. And if I'm honest, they have good reason. Please don't jump down my throat. I know, don't jump down my throat. Hear me out, because I'm one of the people that they hate now. I'm in the same boat as you. And I never hated you when I was there, right? Well, kind of, maybe, once or twice. But, like, most of the time I didn't. But now I'm just with you. I'm a prole on the outside of the castle, just like you. Have a look back at the releases of Games Workshop in the past 5 years. Does anything stand out to you? What about the Plastic Sisters of Battle and the Leagues of Vatan? For decades, those two armies were memes, myths, things held up to show others that Games Workshop did not listen at all to what we wanted. Now, they are here, and they are magnificent. Games Workshop has released not one, but two equivalents of Half-Life 3 in the past 5 years. This is beyond remarkable, and if you showed this to a hobbyist 10 years ago, they would tell you that you were mad, and they would ask you what drugs you were on and if they could have some. Are we happy, though, as hobbyists with Games Workshop? Are we shite? We complain about the rules of the Vatan, the way certain new Sisters models look. We whinge about how the armies unbalance the game in the favour of the Imperium. Essentially, any occasion to bash Games Workshop is taken, even if they hit a home run in our favour. Is it any wonder that they detest us as much as they do? And they do. Let's be honest. If you want proof of how much they don't like you, look at the receipt next time you buy some models from the Games Workshop dude whose smile doesn't quite reach his eyes, then give your head a fucking wobble. Their lack of care for the community and its hostile business practices. More worrying than their lack of care for us and our wallets, however, at least to me, is what these practices will do to the hobby going forwards. There is a complete lack of custodian spirit when it comes to their own games and models, the hobby they claim to be from Games Workshop. They don't give a shit about this hobby. We are price gouged again and again past the breaking point, at a time when in the UK the cost of living for the average person is doubling in terms of energy bills quarter on quarter, where we are seeing a return of fucking food banks, thanks to wages in our country not keeping up with inflation in the slightest. Now, Games Workshop raises their prices. I have another video on this, go and check it out if you want to. But if anything shows you that Games Workshop does not give a shit about this hobby or the people in it, this is where you should look first. They don't care about you, don't defend them. Okay? When your life got harder, they raised their prices. They don't give a shit. They would rather price you out and keep the whales. Let's do a conclusion, shall we? So, it's a heavy one, I know. I know this was a heavy one. And I hope at least some of this video gave you a giggle whilst you were going about your daily business. There are certainly good parts to Games Workshop and their influence in the hobby as a whole. That simply cannot be denied. When given the whiff of money, they can move rather quickly to not only give people what they want, but to give them what they want in the best form of grim, dark sci-fi setting the world has to offer. Beyond this and their model quality, however, the waters become rather murky. Whether you want to support a company who chases away its most loyal and artistic supporters, whether you want to back a company that gouges the money from their already beleaguered and suffering fan base, that is up to you. I'm not saying you should not have to pay for a hobby. I'm not even saying a hobby should not be expensive or a special treat, it should be. I am saying that there is a time and a place to touch grass and read the room. Games Workshop are terrible at this. As the people who love their products get poorer due to inflation and lack of opportunities, Games Workshop raise their prices. People will continue to walk away as they are priced out, directly into the arms of 3D printing, competing companies and, let's be honest, illegal resellers. If Games Workshop aren't smart enough to realise that, Maybe this is completely what they deserve. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. I love the fact that we have a really cool discussion on this channel about the positives and negatives of Games Workshop and other things that are in the hobby. And I always like to try and keep, as I said at the start of this video, a balanced perspective. I love the hobby, I love Warhammer, and you know what, to be honest with you, I still love Games Workshop for the memories that they gave to me as a kid. All of those really special times that I had when I was a kid. But my loyalty is wearing thin. And at this point, as I said a few weeks ago, I can no longer, with a clear conscience, recommend that you stick with them for all of your hobbying needs. I can't. And that's a true tragedy because I want to. Much like other people in this hobby. What do you guys think? Are you done? Do you think that they're a force for good in the hobby? Do you think they're a force for negative in the hobby? If you do think they're negative in the hobby, don't just say that they are. Let me know what they would need to do to become a positive force in the hobby. We can't just sit here and whinge and cry and moan about things. We need to give them a positive recourse. I can't, with a clear conscience, say that I want that for my channel. Whenever people come to me with my channel and say, this is rubbish, and they don't give positive, constructive feedback, I disregard them, right? You need to tell me what's wrong, and then tell me how you think I should fix it. If you can't do that, then keep your mouth shut. And the same thing goes for Games Workshop as well, guys. The same thing goes for Games Workshop. If we can't give them positive feedback or negative feedback that is constructive with suggestions on how we could make it better, we should just not say anything. Put your money and your time where your mouth is. Let them know. And let them know, because I know a few of them watch these videos. I'm in a WhatsApp group, follow them. Have a little look in the comment section down below. Have a little chat. And if you are needing somebody to talk to about the hobby and stuff, we are all on the Discord. We are all there to talk to you. It is free. It is down below. And it's also in the community part of our YouTube page. We love you all a long time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I will speak to you tomorrow, where we will be discussing the Orcs. See you later. Have a good one. Bye.